Hello there. This is a online tutorial that replaces the normal taught session for the module EDU1019. Now, the session that I'm going to talk about today is the one on myths, legends, and folk tales. Now, this follows on from our discussion last week about the nature of culture and how a country's education system is the product of many different things, and culture being one of them. Now, what I want you to do is to download or print out the PowerPoint for this particular session. And rather than me talk through each slide, I want you to read through each slide and try and make sense of what I'm trying to communicate. First of all, in the session, I give some definitions of the key terminology. I talk about what a myth might be and the origins of that particular word. So I want you to first of all try and understand exactly what we mean by a myth. Have a look at some of the definitions I've given you, and also try and do your own research around that particular concept. After the notion of myths, I go on and want you to look at the issue of legends. What exactly do we mean by a legend? What is it? How do we define it? And in terms of history and culture, who are these people that we might associate as being legends? Now, a legend is a bit different to a myth, and I want you to understand the difference, again, through your own research. I use the example of Winston Churchill in the PowerPoint, who is someone that is factual, a real person, but if you like, his how we see that person over time, especially as many years have passed since that person lived. Some people speculate that these people are being romanticized and looked back at in a more of a legendary way rather than a factual one. So that's something interesting, linking to culture and society. So have a little consideration about this issue of what really is a myth, what is a legend, who are people that we might think of as being legends, and also how are real people seen in a legendary way. And that links on to the notion of the cult of personality, this idea that there are certain people who, almost like the real person, we never get to see, because we only see them through how the media or through how the state or how other people make them into this idealized, heroic or almost perfect image. And I've got some examples on the slide, people like Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, even our own Queen, who is given attributes that maybe aren't so far true, but we like to think that's how the person is because the media and because society makes us think about that person in a more of a legendary way. So there are the issues about legends. Then I want you to think about the notion of fairy tales, and I talk about what exactly are they, which ones can you remember, how are they maybe used in schools, what are they for? There's often a sort of a rationale for fairy tales to teach children how to behave, or how to think, or how to do certain things. So they're often quite moralistic. They often end happily, although not always. And there's often some kind of supernatural characters within them, witches, trolls, goblins, etc., often drawn from European mythology. So again, the fairy tale across Europe is quite important. If we move on from that, we can think that within Europe, we've often had quite a lot of movements over time that have been very influential. Mythological movements, and many different parts of Europe have different histories of legends and folk tales and myths that people have often believed so fully because they often link to those questions like, why am I here? Why does the wind blow? Why does the sun follow the moon, etc.? How do we have answers for these questions? Often cultures in Europe have created mythologies around some of these things. So we've got things like Norse mythology, which is associated with the Vikings. We've got the Celtic mythology, which links to our own part of the world. Things like druids, people that might go to Stonehenge, people that worship the trees and water and spirits and these types of things. And many of our current festivals link back to this Celtic past. Things like Halloween, even Christmas, which is the sort of the festival of in midwinter, and many other types of festivals. We, for example, in our Christmas, we have the evergreen tree, we have mistletoe. These are all things that have become Christian over time, but started off in a pagan, in a Celtic past. Then we've got things like Greek mythology and linked to sort of Zeus and other gods and things that sort of affected the Greeks, and those types of issues that then moved into Roman mythology. This is Rome before the Roman Empire became Christian. So again, these mythological movements over time within Europe have been very, very, very influential. Now, what's important for us in the 21st century is that often some of these historical, mythological ways of seeing countries and places have often been linked to the rise in nationalism. You often see that lots of far-right parties within Europe often use symbolism that relates back to a mythological or a legendary past. For example, the EDL or the BNP in the UK might focus on imagery like St. George or St. George and the Dragon and these types of things. And that's the same across Europe, where traditional mythology about a past within that country that is seen as very important, even though it's maybe not true, that imagery has been used within the far right to kind of glorify the past, which is a place that these people would like to return to. So there's issues I put on the slides that relate to nationalism. To do a bit of searching around some of these nationalistic use of mythology and symbols within current society. I've got quite a lot of images and examples of some things that you might want to look at on the slides as well. Equally, if you think about the influence of myths and legends in things like literature or music, even things like Shakespeare, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, The Hobbit, Harry Potter, those are sort of in English and British context, but across Europe there's this often recurring theme of mythology and legendary actions within literature and within art. So again, I've given you some examples of art and literature and music that you might want to look at that draws upon the notion of legends and myths. Okay, very, very influential across the continent. Equally, within the continent, we do have a mix of different traditions. It's not just that one person might celebrate or consider something in one way. They might change it or alter it somehow. And if we look at the example of Christmas, different traditions across Europe have different ways of celebrating what is in essence the same festival, but different cultural ways of doing things. And that links a little bit back perhaps to our discussion last week when we watched the clip of the Swedish people talking about their context. As we move on to the current day, we've got things like contemporary culture, lots of films, books, TV shows, series that relate and refer back to these things. Things like perhaps Game of Thrones. I don't know if you watch that, but these types of programs that draw from European mythology, even though they're fictional and made up. Now, moving on from that, we've also got the issue of urban myths and misinformation. Things that people think are true that might not be true. They often can reinforce stereotyped or prejudiced views. And the internet is a very interesting source of these misinformation, these urban myths, these internet memes that go around that people might believe are true that aren't. And I've got some examples there of things like the man with the crocodile that's made up. There was another article about twins, one white, one black. Well, that was actually a true story. And then the cat that is fake. So some are true, some are false. But with the internet, it's sometimes hard to understand which is which is a myth, which is true, which is not. And as humans, we're actually quite gullible. We like to believe things are true when sometimes they're not. Now, to finish off this session, I want you to have a think about how myths and legends and these types of things have had an impact upon childhood. Think about the issue of storytelling. Think about the curriculum. I've given you some examples where they might be used within that. And also have a little think about some links that you can refer to. I've put 2 there that refer to resources that might be influential and important in teaching children about these things, or using myths and legends as a way of teaching within the classroom context. So an awful lot of things that I've given you to think about. Go through each slide, have a computer in front of you and research some of those issues. Have a think about the importance of myths and legends within society. Have a think about how important they are currently, actually, for us, not only in school, but in the wider society. So start to develop these ideas. And the final thing I've got you to think about is a link that looks at cultural literacy. Now, I'm not going to explain what that is now because the link will explain. So have a read of that as well and consider what 10 things would you choose for university students like yourselves to have within that area of cultural literacy. So again, that's the final task that I'd like you to consider. So again, apologies for not being there with you. Hopefully I've given you enough introduction that you can follow the slides. I've put more slides onto the PowerPoint than were there before to try and give you some things to work on your own, some images, some links, and some key definition and terminology. So hopefully you'll find that useful. Sorry I'm not there with you tomorrow. If you want to come and see me in person, then obviously I'm repeating the full session with the Thursday group. Anyway, if I don't see you, I'll see you next week. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.